It's Tuesday, February 26th. You would recall that during assembly elections in Telangana in December last year, there were reports of mass deletion of voter names from electoral rolls. So much so that the state's chief electoral officer had to apologize for the missing names. 27 lakh names were allegedly deleted. These reports were mainly from the Greater Hyderabad Municipal Corporation area. Now, a reply to a right to information query filed by Srinivas Kodeli, a security researcher, shows that due diligence was not exercised by the Commission while deleting voter names. The then Chief Electoral Officer of Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, Bhavar Lal, in a communication with the Secretary Election Commission of India, had in 2015 flagged the extreme shortage of officials and said that door-to-door verification had not been done properly under the National Electoral Roll Purification and Authentication Program, which means the process relied heavily on the software to delete names. Let's put this in context. In 2015, the Election Commission decided to link India's biometric identification Aadhaar with voter identity cards as part of what was named the National Electoral Roll Purification and Authentication Program. The exercise was meant to clean up electoral rolls by removing duplications. Within months of the process starting, however, the Supreme Court put a stop to it given that Aadhaar's constitutional validity was under challenge. But by then, 20 lakh names were allegedly already deleted. Not only did the Election Commission overreach by linking Aadhaar to voter identity cards without the consent of citizens in question, it also did not reportedly follow any of the legal requirements when deleting names from electoral rolls. The people whose names were deleted were not informed and no arrangements made for them to reapply for inclusion in the electoral rolls. Also, pilot runs of the National Electoral Roll Purification and Authentication Program had thrown up an incredibly high failure rate of 93%, the News Minute reported. After 3 days of violence, there was relative peace on the streets of Itanagar, Arunachal Pradesh on Monday. The violence had claimed 3 lives. The state has been witnessing pitched battles over the issue of granting PRC, a permanent residence certificate, to 6 tribal communities who are not Arunachal natives but have been living in the state, mainly in the Namsai and Changlang districts, for decades. The demand for PRC by these communities is a long-standing one. So what is the significance of a PRC? A permanent residence certificate is essentially a government-issued legal document that proves domicile of the applicant. The certificate helps in accessing domicile-specific quotas and admissions, or indeed various schemes or jobs of the state. So why is there opposition to the granting of PRC to these communities? These communities are recognized as scheduled tribes in neighboring Assam. Those opposing the move contend that the rights and interests of indigenous people of Arunachal Pradesh will be compromised. On Sunday, Chief Minister Pema Khandu tweeted, "For the peace and tranquility of our state, the government has already dropped the PRC matter of Namsai and Changlang districts. Elections to the state are due along with Lok Sabha polls this year." Should Twitter be responsible for every post that appears on its platform? Would you be fine with WhatsApp pre-screening every message you send to check whether it contains illegal speech? These are some of the questions that arise out of the government's proposed changes to the intermediary rules, which, if they pass, could alter the very nature of the Indian internet. What are these new rules and why do they matter? First, what are intermediaries? Almost anyone will agree that Facebook is not the same as a newspaper. It does not have an editor, and other than having community guidelines, does not control what people say on its platform. So, should Facebook be liable, for example, if someone uses it to spread hate speech or defame someone else? Lawmakers the world over, including eventually in India, concluded that it did not make sense to have companies such as Facebook face direct liability for what turns up on their platforms. These entities were classified as intermediaries because they facilitated exchange of information between people without exercising any control on what is said. By this definition, the term intermediary covers a large number of organizations. There are, of course, social media platforms such as Facebook and WhatsApp, but also e-commerce marketplaces where anyone can list a product, domain registrars that allow you to buy the name of a website, internet service providers that enable you to access the internet, and even physical cyber cafes. Crucially, the rules under the Information Technology Act of 2008 provide legal immunity, generally called safe harbor, to intermediaries for any material traveling through their pipes. What does the law currently in effect say? Those intermediaries that wanted safe harbor have to comply with all the rules laid out. For example, Section 79 stated that if such entities were informed by anyone that certain content on their platforms were grossly harmful or obscene, they had to take it down. In 2015, while also striking down the infamous Section 66A, the Supreme Court wrote down a part of Section 79, ruling that intermediaries would have to take down material only if they were told to do so by a court or a government agency. The proposed rules go way further, putting a much greater onus on intermediaries to crack down on material that may be considered illegal. Here are some of the major proposed changes. Monthly warning. The proposal would require intermediaries to tell their users every month that they need to comply with the rules and regulations. Critics have argued that a monthly notice would lead to fatigue and people would simply start ignoring the warning. Tracing the originator. Any government agency could ask for assistance from any intermediary and the entity would have to respond within 72 hours. A rule that seems aimed directly at WhatsApp and other services which provide end-to-end encryption and claim their users have fully private conversations would require the intermediary to enable the tracing out of originator. They would essentially have to ensure the government can find out who first sent a message, effectively meaning encryption would not be allowed. Keeping your data. Companies are already required to keep data for a period of 90 days if a government agency asks for it. The new rules state the data has to be held for 180 days and that a request from any government agency, which could mean any entity from the Home Ministry to a panchayat, can ask a platform to hold it indefinitely and users do not have to be informed. Proactive censorship. The proposed rules want intermediaries to deploy technology-based automated tools or appropriate mechanisms with appropriate controls for proactively identifying and removing or disabling public access to unlawful information or content. In other words, the government wants these platforms to use artificial intelligence to crack down on what it considers illegal speech with no clear checks on how this process would actually work. Over 4 days, more than 190 of the highest officials of the Catholic Church attended an unprecedented summit on clerical sexual abuse within the Roman Catholic Church at the Vatican. Presiding the summit, Pope Francis called for an all-out battle but failed to outline new, definitive policy. For many, the summit had been an opportunity for the creation of a church-wide law dismissing abusive priests and bishops who used to cover up for them. However, as the New York Times reports, the Pope used the meeting to try to persuade skeptical bishops to take strong action, leaving victims' fate to individual integrity and discretion, no change from the past. In arguably the biggest admission from the summit, German Cardinal Reinhard Marx said files that could have documented the terrible deeds and named those responsible were destroyed or not even created. While speaking on the historic hushing up of complaints, survivors detailed how accused clergymen were sheltered, shifted to new parishes, or retired quietly. And the problem of hushing up is visible even at the top. In a special report, the BBC outlined how Cardinal Oswald Gracious, the Archbishop of Mumbai, touted to be in line to the Vatican and one of the 4 organizers of the summit, has also been accused of failing to respond to reports of sexual abuse back home. By failing to call the police in at least one case, the BBC found the Cardinal may have violated rules under the POCSO Act. Last October, the Pope himself was accused of having colluded with his predecessor in hushing up abuse charges against Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, who was defrocked earlier this month. Meanwhile, of over 100 clerical sexual abuse survivors invited from around the world, there was only one person from the African continent. Still believed to be a problem of the West, abuse remains little discussed in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. That is, in countries that do not have strong anti abuse rules, governments or media outlets willing to investigate the church, as in the United States, Australia, or Canada, explained the Washington Post. Co-produced by Guneeth Monga, Iranian-American filmmaker Reka Zehtabchi's Period, End of Sentence, won the Academy Award in the Best Documentary Short Subject category. The film looks at how the women of Hapur district near Delhi outgrew the stigma attached to menstruation in their community thanks to a sanitary pad-making machine. When a low-cost sanitary napkin manufacturing machine is installed in their neighborhood, a group of women take up the charge of operating the device, distributing pads and creating awareness about menstrual hygiene. The machine is the invention of Arunachalam Muruganathan, the entrepreneur who inspired the 2018 Akshay Kumar starrer Pad Man, and has been installed in the village courtesy the Pad Project, a California-based non-profit. What a win, back home too, especially here in Kathikera, home to Sneha, one of the film's subjects. You celebrate Tuesday, and we'll be back with more news and analysis tomorrow. Love your morning fix? Help support our journalism. Subscribe to Scroll Plus using the link in the description.